Look at this tiny PC. Over the last few days, I've designed and printed the smallest case I've ever had on my desk. Not only is it compact, I managed to build a system that's powerful and still silent. Originally, I planned to make it under 4 liters, but to protect the components better, I increased the wall thickness. So now it's 4.1 liters. But this gave me room for a 46mm CPU cooler instead of the 36mm I planned. And that means instead of the i3, I'll be using the i5-14-400 CPU for heavier tasks. So let's start the assembly. After printing all the parts, I started assembling the frame, the structure that will hold everything together. I printed it in PETG because it's much more heat-resistant and durable compared to regular PLA. I started with the I/O shield. It snaps perfectly into place. Then comes the motherboard, an Asus H610 i plus Mini-ITX motherboard that supports DDR4, PCIe 4.0, and has just the right amount of ports for my needs. Under this tiny 46mm cooler, a Core i5-14400 is locked in, just waiting to be unleashed. For storage and seamless performance, I'm using a Silicon Power 1TB SSD with 5,000 megabytes per second read and 4,800 megabytes per second write speeds. Low budget, great performance. Now let's talk about something equally important: power. The HDPlex 250-watt power supply is completely silent. No fan, no noise. Thanks to gallium nitride tech, it's also super efficient and incredibly compact. This little brick will run the i5, the RTX 5060, and the rest of the system with no issues. And best of all, you won't hear a thing. It's a perfect match for this build, where every millimeter and every decibel matters. I chose 32 gigabytes of RGB DDR4 from Kingston. Solid speeds, dual channel, and the top RGB lighting looks awesome in the dark, but still pops during the day too, especially since the case is designed to keep the LEDs visible. A flexible PCIe riser lets me mount the GPU sideways, a must for tight builds like this. When it comes to smooth gaming in a small case, I'm counting on nothing less than the RTX 5060 low profile. 8 gigabytes of VRAM, DLSS support, and full ray tracing, all packed into a dual-slot, half-height card. This is real next-gen power in a tight space where even a GT 1030 would usually struggle. And with proper cooling and airflow, I'm confident this card will perform flawlessly in this build. I already love it, but I still have a few screws left to secure the outer shell. Originally, in the sub-4-liter version, the shell was much thinner, but tall, thin BETG prints always caused problems. I realized that making the shell a bit thicker means a sturdier structure, easier printing, and not least a slightly larger CPU cooler, which results in much better performance. Everything's finally in place. I had a blast putting it together. Now let's give it some power and start testing. One of my favorite games is Ghost of Tsushima. Stunning graphics and an even better gameplay experience. The RTX 5060 is a perfect match for this game, pushing over 140 FPS at 1080p on very high settings. I switched to 1440p, and it still stays well above 100 FPS. At this resolution, the GPU does heat up a bit, so if you want to bring the temps down, a bit of undervolting with MSI Afterburner can easily drop the power consumption, and with it the temperature by at least 20 degrees. Even with undervolting, you'll still get over 100 FPS at 1080p. Cyberpunk 2077 runs silky smooth at max settings in 1080p. DLSS on quality and frame generation turned on, pulling a solid 80 to 90 FPS. That's seriously impressive for a compact build, especially with a game this demanding. The moment I switched to 1440p, the GPU jumped to 85 degrees. Not really a shock in a tiny case with limited airflow. So if you're going for higher resolutions, it's a good idea to manage the temps with MSI Afterburner. The moment I switched on my custom Afterburner settings, GPU power and temps dropped big time. It held around 65 to 70 degrees, and even though the FPS went slightly below 60, the game stayed rock solid. Thanks to frame generation, Indiana Jones in the Great Circle hits over 70 FPS on ultra settings with the RTX 5060 low profile. Sure, it gets a bit warm in this small case, but nothing concerning. Temps stay in check. After switching to 1440p, the game still ran in the playable range, and temps were totally fine. But if you want more FPS, you'll probably need to drop the resolution a bit. Personally, I think it's still playable at 1440p on Ultra, but if you're chasing higher frames, going down to high settings or 1080p would be the way to go. I checked the power draw during gaming, and it stayed comfortably under 200 watts, right in the sweet spot for the HDPlex 250 watts. This PSU is a beast in disguise. Super compact, dead silent, highly efficient, and more than capable of powering a serious gaming setup in a tiny case. Cinebench R23 gave me 1,676 points in single core and about 12,500 in multi-core, all while the cooler kept things under control without making a sound. Running the Unigine Heaven 4 benchmark at 1080p on Ultra with extreme tessellation, I got a solid 143 FPS average and a score of 3,601. Temps sat around 80 degrees. Not exactly cool, but nothing to worry about. Sequential RAID speeds hit nearly 3,500 megabytes per second, with write speeds just above 3,400 megabytes per second. Solid results for a budget SSD. That's it. The full build, every test I could throw at it, and of course, a lot of fun putting it all together. I really hope this video gave you a clear look at what this tiny system can do, and maybe even some inspiration for your own mini ITX project. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit like, and if you don't want to miss future builds, upgrades, or new crazy designs, subscribe and follow along. See you in the next one.